Welcome to No Room for Phonies. It is the end of April. Hi. Charles is back because he's going to be my nemesis for this. I don't know if that's the right
Maybe
word.
a foil, not
a foil.
nemesis.
Because today I want to talk about the top 10 ways to improve public education for kids. So before we get into that, though, I want to remind you of the cocktail of the month. The weather hopefully will get warmer. The snow is now gone
Not
here.
the cilantro mojito.
Not the cilantro mojito, but a mojito is a favorite of ours, just not with cilantro. But for May, the new cocktail of the month is the salty dog, which is a lemon wedge, salt, grapefruit juice, ice cubes, 1.5 ounces of vodka, and lime. And a lime wedge.
That sounds good.
So that'd be nice for sitting outside in our new chairs our new rocking chairs.
Is it ruby red grapefruit juice?
It doesn't say.
Okay.
But anyway, so that's the cocktail for May. So that's called the Salty Dog. I just like the name of it. And the book of the month for me is The Rose Code by Kate Quinn. It took me a while to read it because, it took me a while to actually pick it up to read it because I have read so many World War II novels about women. It's like, how many books can...
of its own?
Yeah, it is. But this one is actually amazing. It is really actually heart-stopping. Like, it describes it in the thing as heart-stopping. 3 female code breakers at Bletchley Park, which does actually exist. Mm-hmm. And the spy they must root out after the war is over. And it's intriguing. The 3 women come together as very different people. One is wealthy, one is like majorly, and one is like... Anyway, they're just totally different people. And mixed in all of this is also Prince Philip of Greece and the royal wedding, if you can believe it.
Wow.
And...
very timely, I guess.
But the mysterious traitor emerges from the shadows of Bletchley Park. And the girls fall apart after the war, like the threesome. Mm-hmm. But they come together to... sort this out, and it's very actually
cool. And didn't you say something about Princess
Kate? Yeah, so Kate Middleton's grandmother was a code breaker or worked in Bletchley Park. So there's
but it's all secret.
Yeah. Well, not anymore.
Oh, okay.
But yeah. I mean, she doesn't talk about what she did there.
No.
They had to sign all the. Yeah. Anyway, I don't. Spoiler alert! I don't want to talk too much about it, but I would really encourage you to read it. Kate Quinn is a great author, but this is a really good book. For the website, my website, look for cool ideas for your garden, as well as quilting and sewing. Update on my books. I'm going to be putting like my April reading list, which I think I'm up to about 10 books that I've read in April.
Nice.
Recipes. I've also added...
You're going to put that fig sauce that you did?
Oh, yeah, that Greek fig sauce on steak was so good.
Yeah.
I've added some ideas on finding your core values from some work that we're doing on Udemy, mm-hmm. on life coaching, a course that we're taking. So I put that on there as well.
Nice.
And for the podcast of the month, I'm promoting Sky Comp Solutions, which is where my son Sebastian works. But there's one podcast. It's called, what is it called, the podcast?
The episode?
No, the podcast itself. I can't.
Oh, something it.
Yeah.
It's a play on words.
Anyways, if you look up Sky Comp Solutions podcast, you'll find it. Yeah. And I especially like the one where the CEO, Serge, talks about his business model, which is a book that they promote and a whole bunch of ideas that they use for their business model. So for a small business person, it's a really good one to listen to.
Absolutely.
So that's all kind of the updates. So I want to talk about the top 10 ways that, and these are not like research, there's nothing behind them.
I wouldn't say that.
Well, they're my own personal research of 36 years in public education. So they are what I have observed. And I do a ton of reading anyway, so
It's informed.
It's informed. It's not just, and I don't say these things lightly, but I think.
And for the audience, by the way, I don't know what she's about to talk about. I haven't heard any.
I haven't talked to him.
In our marriage, I've heard a lot about her talking about work, but.
I haven't made a ton of notes for this podcast because I'm very passionate about education, so I wanted to speak from my heart and not from my notes. So I kind of just went that way about it. So number 10 for me is that I don't feel that our country, and I'm not talking about each individual province, our country has, as a whole, sees education as an essential service.
Right.
And so the country doesn't have a vision for the future of education that gets filtrated down to each province. And I'm not talking about the way it's done. I'm talking about the vision at the top that plays itself out in all the different, it's almost like the moral compass of the country when it comes to education.
Right.
And the example that I'm going to use is Finland, where they have a vision is to become a modern society and an economy free from domination by large powers. So that's their overall goal for education.
Right.
So, but individual districts and things probably interpret and do that in a slightly different way. But it's something where the education minister or whatever can say, show me how you are following our vision as a country.
Well, and they came so close to being taken over in World War II by Russia.
Yeah.
And I think that started it. And I think Canada in World War I and World War II had a common sense and a common goal as a society. But I think
we all know that education was about the industrial age, right? And teaching people to be, and we haven't really advanced past that.
No, we're still stuck in the industrial era.
And so that is, I think that we need to relook, and I think that should be done through consultation and surveying about what education could be from people outside of education, and not we should go back to the old ways and kids should do this kids should do that. And I don't mean about strategies or a how to, like old math versus new math, or how to teach reading, because there are research-based strategies on how to do all those things.
Right.
Like the fact that we still struggle with how to teach reading now is stupid to me. There's so many strategies on how to effectively teach reading that teachers refuse to learn and do and embrace. Whatever. Not all.
Well, we'll get to that.
But researching about what education should do for our country and our society and what kind of citizens we want. That's where the vision for education comes, not from how it's done or what strategies. And so I think in Ontario and Canada, we are short-sighted, and it's evident in our policies and our contracts with teachers.
It's all short-term goals without any long-term vision. And the
short-term goal is always about keeping people happy instead of doing what is right.
Which people keeping happy?
Keeping the teachers happy.
Yeah, not about keeping parents and children happy.
No. And instead of doing what is right and what would actually benefit the society and the humanity.
Yeah.
So that's my number one thing that should change. My number 2, actually I'm going backwards. So that was 10. This is 9. Sorry, I have them numbered differently here. I think that student-centered data should be used to drive instruction on a daily basis. So I believe, and this came first from somebody named Carmel Cravola, which we all teased and called her Crayola, but her idea is correct, and it's an old idea, but it's all students can learn given the right support and time.
Right.
So differentiated learning is the key to meeting every student's needs. And I'm sure you see that in the college too.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's a different flavor, universal design for learning, but it is basically two sides of the same coin.
But in order to differentiate, you have to know your students, and you have to understand the differences between assessment for learning, of learning, and as learning.
Right. And maybe you should explain what those are. But for data, like some people are afraid that data means that you're labeling and you're pegging students according to some numbers like IQ scores. And
no, that's not what I mean. I mean that when you, like I always said to my staff, when you start a 100-minute math block, you should put up the learning that you think children will walk away with. Right. For them to see.
So that the kids know.
Well, this is what we're working on today, and this is what I think you're going to be able to do or know or understand.
Right. And remember, some of your good teachers would send home and would tell the students in their take-home journals or their communication.
Yes.
Book, this is when your mom asks you, what did you do today? This is what you say.
So it's up there. But then at the end of the period, when you do your consolidation, you either do an exit card or a quick little something so you can actually see whether, and sometimes a learning might take 2 days or 3 days, but before you feel that the kids are ready to show their understanding, show what you know is what I call, like when I think of assessment for learning, and as learning, that's a show as you know. But the assessment of learning is the test that you give at the end of the bigger unit, or the, not necessarily even a test, but the product that comes out of, several months of learning, right? Or several weeks of learning.
What's the difference between assessment for learning and as learning?
Assessment as learning happens as they're doing it, like seriously, as they're doing it, you're changing.
Right. So if there's like 2 math questions and the kids work on it and you grade it or mark it on the spot.
Yes.
Then they say, oh, I've made a mistake here, or I've been successful and these are the steps that I took. And so then they've been assessed.
Yes. It's almost like self-evaluation.
Okay.
More than for learning is more like
diagnostic.
Yes, and exit cards, and deciding that, okay, they didn't quite get that today, so I'm going to go back at it in a different way.
Right.
But creating independent thinkers is about the modeling that happens when teachers follow the research and learn to be intuitive about serving their students. Like that serving mentality about, I am here to make this group of kids successful, has to be based on data, knowing your students.
Right.
And my favorite example,
like parents know when they see report cards, this teacher doesn't know my kid.
Yeah, absolutely. And my favorite example of that is actually the teacher that I worked with at Park, Ryan, who was an exceptional teacher. And when I first looked at what he was doing, I thought, this guy doesn't mark enough. Like, he doesn't mark enough stuff, right? He was teaching, I think, grade 6. But when I actually observed what he was doing, no, he wasn't putting check marks on every single thing. But when you talk to him about his students, he knew them. He was working in small groups. He was doing assessment all the time. He was having them assess what they were doing all the time. But he didn't have to mark and put a number on every single thing. So the data that we think of traditionally isn't the data that I'm talking about. Right. It's the data of understanding.
How did he converse with the parents who were still old school, saying, what does my kid have? Do they have a C or B or an A?
Well, he said I gave them more. Like he was great with parents, because once you start talking about who your child, who that child really is and how they are as a learner, you draw parents in because they're like, whoa, yeah, that is my kid. Yeah, that is my kid. Oh, okay, this is how they can do better. This is their potential as a learner. They're not meeting it.
Right.
This is why.
Right.
So, and to me, special education is a joke right now. Both special ed teachers have very little specialist training. They are not good coaches they don't understand differentiation. Special ed is about differentiation.
Yeah.
And it's about you as the special ed.
It's not plugging them into a software package.
No, and software packages are great.
As a tool,
but you have to be assessing and moving them and adding on to that as you go. So that's number 9. Number 8 is strong leadership, and principals need to be curriculum leaders first, and all other parts of school life need to be focused on meeting the needs of students as learners where they are each day. So
what demands get put on principals to sidetrack them from being curriculum leaders?
I don't know that any do. I think that if you are not a curriculum leader and you get put in a position of being a principal, then you find other things to do because you don't know what to do.
Okay.
Right? I taught for a lot of years.
Because I remember a principal that just wanted to play sports all the time and coach sports.
But they don't know how to.
But they were
they don't know how to be a curriculum leader.
No.
So, that way, and I'll get to this later on about the community of the school. Absolutely is important. But why do you send your child to school? You send your child to school to be educated. To become a learner, to become a thinker, to become whatever your vision of education is. Not just to learn times tables, but to become a learner and a contributing member of society.
Not just to industry.
That has to be the priority.
Yeah.
We are teachers. We have to do a lot of other things, but that's part of the job.
Yeah.
So strong leadership. As well, leaders need to be organized and whatever and all those other things. But if you're not a curriculum leader and you're the head of a school, it doesn't really seem to make much sense to me. No. And I don't see that as a priority in hiring anymore.
No.
So the next one is commitment to equity. The first thing that I think of when I think of equity in schools, and I believe that all the focus on Black Lives Matter and Indigenous and all that is completely necessary right now. There's almost everything is focused on that right now because it's been left out for so long.
The vacuum has been forever.
So that's really important because that's just a look at history, and history is how we understand. So that commitment to equity but also students as learning disabled and other things also have to be special needs students have to be treated equitably too. And that's where inclusion is 100% important.
And then socioeconomic.
Yes. But this is where I say about one of the biggest things that needs to be reevaluated in schools and across schools is fundraising, because the government put in place the model where it doesn't matter if your father works at a gas station or they're a doctor to some degree.
Yeah.
The funding is the same unless the doctor sends their kid to private school, which is a whole nother story, because private schools, some of them grade according to how much you're paying.
Right.
Because you're paying for your child to be successful.
Right.
Which is a whole nother story, but
but
a community
provincially, the funding model is, it doesn't matter where your parents live and what neighborhood they live in, each child gets the same amount of money.
Except
when it comes to
fundraising. Because when I was at Parliament Oak, I could put out an email and someone would drop off a check for $1,000.
Yeah.
When I worked downtown in an inner city school, we had to stand on our heads and spit nickels to make $100. So how can government put a policy in place that helps all schools? And how can we as a society be more generous with each other?
Well, I don't understand. As a parent, when I wrote the checks for all the donations for school trips and that, and then for the fundraising projects, like, to me, I wouldn't care if that was all pooled in one central location and then distributed equal. But there are parents like, well, I don't want that to go to that other school. This is for my school's kids' uniform and whatever. So that selfishness isn't a government's fault.
No, it isn't.
And it's not the teacher's fault.
No.
And it's our society's fault.
It's a societal problem. But I just feel like that's where the inequity occurs. Yeah. And that gets into racism, special ed, like everything, indigenous, like all these places where you can talk about it in the same way as you do the distribution of vaccines. Like, because they can't do some of those things because of
they don't have
the history,
right? And they can't there's less ability for self-advocacy because of barriers that have been set up systemically,
right? And I mean, I remember being at an inner city school in St. Catharines, and compared to Niagara-on-the-Lake, and I wanted to take the kids out of town to a camping experience. And we worked like crazy to raise money for that. Whereas in Niagara-on-the-Lake, the parents just wrote a check for their kid to go to camp. Not all of them.
No, but you didn't have to do like 5 fundraising activities that were
10, 15, 20. Like, we did all kinds of things to try to just raise enough money to get those kids who some of them had never been out of St. Catharines. So that to me is a bigger inequity. And we all know that everything comes down to money. Everything ends up being about access to things, and access to things is about money. So anyway, that commitment, like, why was it so difficult for me to get certain things at certain schools? Like smart boards, for example. I could get them at one school because I could fundraise for them and put them in everywhere. And then they build these fancy new schools. And that's great. But every old school should have the same access to technology. That's a huge equity issue. Every school should have the same access to technology,
regardless of the building.
Per capita. Right? Like, that is a whole nother equity. So that's my next one. And then this one is a big one. High quality teachers who are held accountable for what happens in the classroom. They have to be held accountable, and not because their kids do well on EQAO, although that's part of it. But the current system of teacher evaluation is not helpful, because this goes back to the hiring of the principal. If the principal can't walk into a classroom and understand that the curriculum is being well taught, or look at their plans and see that this is not being done well from a curriculum point of view and a differentiation point of view, then
they can't.
They
can't mentor or guide the teacher if it's a weak teacher.
No. So I propose a system that is support from within and pressure from without. So I think of the old days where the inspector came. And I'm not saying it has to be that kind of...
No, I know.
But I'm just talking about looking for people who are curriculum experts to go in and say, no, this needs, and we need to be adjusting, and here's some differentiation pieces that you need to put in place, where the principal is the one who offers the support, because they have to live in that building every day. Right. And I have experienced, and my friends as principals have experienced, the circling of the wagons that happens when you start down the road of an unsatisfactory evaluation.
Right.
And I would challenge any parent anywhere to ask at the ministry level how many unsuccessful teacher evaluations actually occur in each district. Because I'm telling you, it shouldn't be a thing. It like, if you're unsatisfactory, teacher evaluation is a joke.
Yeah. And the thing is, then there's the strong teachers and the newer teachers who are willing to grow and improve. But, everybody gets imposter syndrome at some point. And if it's set up where you are the principal is the support and the pressure from without, those people that are having that imposter syndrome and are afraid of being observed and afraid of being evaluated, they can come to you and say, I'm terrified of being observed.
Yeah.
And you can coach them. Well, get this ready. Now, are you ready for this? And the strong teachers will be ready.
Yeah.
The mediocre ones who want to grow. But the weak ones, you can say, no, you're not ready. And this is what you need to do.
Yeah.
But here I am to help you.
Yeah.
But
I'll sit with you. Yeah.
You can't do that now because the weak teacher complains about it, and they get
and unfortunately,
gang.
that's become a union protection, right? And you feel it in your job too.
Yes, absolutely.
Your person isn't allowed to come and.
No, like observations have to be voluntary, and
but and yet you're picking up this big salary with no accountability. So
that's
I think that would change.
I think with
public education,
like with elementary school, I think parents don't understand what they don't know what they don't know.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So much
every school I
advocates.
went into, I started doing mini workshops on what your report card should look like, what you should expect to come home, what does a math class look like, how are we teaching reading. And for the most part, parents were not informed about that. And even...
Well, and I get that a lot of parents are busy surviving at every economic level. They're trying to maintain their incomes and whatever. But I'm flabbergasted that they don't advocate for their child very much, except for the helicopter parents who are extreme the other way.
Right. And we didn't go into our kids' schools very often, but when I did, I was armed with the curriculum and knowledge, I was a teacher.
So we know how to do it.
But you got to know that every curriculum your child is being taught is available on the website. Online. You can read it.
Yeah,
what the heck are you doing in
I downloaded the math curriculum and read through the grade, whatever it was, and went into the meet with the teacher.
7.
And I said, okay, here's these objectives. I don't see any of that happening. The report cards, you're supposed to have covered these 3 strands by January. You've done one of them.
Yeah.
And now you're playing catch up. And
it's and then when you try to hold people accountable, they either attack you or go on stress leave.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying everyone, but I'm just saying it's a more common problem in education than I think people realize.
Yeah.
So the next one I have is alignment and coherence from one school and one district to another. And I'm going to use the word that we had this morning in our course of congruence and genuineness towards parents and students, where you're making sure that there's an alignment of things like across, like I'm sure you try to do it across your levels.
Yes.
But that should be, it doesn't matter how I necessarily teach. You should look at the best researched way of teaching that, and that alignment should happen across.
Yeah.
Because I don't think in education we have too many places where we can't say that there's research-based evidence on how this is best taught.
No.
There's a lot of research in education about the best way.
There's a lot of conferences and a lot of teachers going to conferences and coming, but in our case, there's people going to conferences, but we used to have what we call brown bag lunches, or sharing lunches or whatever, where somebody who had gone to a conference came back and in a 30-minute presentation while we all had lunch together.
Yeah.
Sure. But all that has disappeared.
Yeah. Well, and I don't want to keep going back
No.
to this isn't about bad union, whatever, but a lot of that is because of
the rise of mediocrity.
Yes, rise of mediocrity for sure. So my next
and the other thing is like the congruence across district, for example, like parents shop for schools that, you know, they know, oh, this principal deals with bullying and that principal doesn't deal with bullying. Like that consistency should be everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I don't know if you were talking about the different school boards or not.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to get into Catholic and public and whatever.
No, the only thing I see is the amount of money, back to that,
Mm-hmm.
that's spent on marketing to compete for students for the two different boards.
Yeah.
So that money could be going to kids, and instead it's going to advertisement.
Yeah, and there isn't a whole lot of difference other than uniforms and religion.
Yeah.
Between.
Exactly. And
right?
then when it comes to, I'm sorry, the equity, there is a problem.
Yeah, I agree. I think so too. So that's another one. The next one that I wanted to talk about was the idea of community. And I think that is one of the things that I was a curriculum leader because I understood curriculum, and I mean, I'm not going to be shy about saying that I was a curriculum leader. I knew what to look for when I went in a classroom. But I also think that students and parents need to feel part of a vital and active community that lives within the border of a bigger community, including the country and the world.
Yeah.
So, I mean...
And the truth of the matter is, just for people who aren't from Ontario, there are safety protocols for any parent to go in and have a guest visitor tag. There's cameras, there's locked, whatever. But there is a protocol for all that. So there shouldn't be schools where the principal is allowed to shut out parents.
No.
But that happens.
Oh, yeah.
And that to me is a huge problem with this.
And I went, like one of my goals as a principal was to have a monthly thing where parents could actually be physically in the school, like for an event.
Right.
And then during those events, I drew people in to be readers and school lunch people and all those kinds of things, so that there were people coming and going in my schools all the time as parents. Yeah. And we weren't afraid that they might see or do something, something that because most of the time,
and if they saw something, they could come to you and then you would deal with it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, once COVID fades or whatever happens in the future.
But this was a big problem before COVID.
But I mean, parents of Ontario need to know that they cannot be locked out of those buildings.
No. Oh, no.
That is actually not allowed.
No. And you can actually, be a volunteer. Like I used to say to some parents, maybe be a volunteer in somebody else's class because it's not going kids? To. Yeah. But, I mean, teacher librarian time is low on the, you can go in and shelve books and... you can clean up.
Kids, listen to kids.
You can clean up if you don't feel like reading with kids. Mm-hmm. You can actually help. I had parents that helped with coaching all the time.
Yeah.
The only thing you have to physically have there is a teacher on the bench.
Right. Did they have to have a police check to do coaching?
I was at the point when I retired of asking everyone to produce a police check just because. Mm-hmm. And if it was a pay thing, I paid for it. Right. But it covered you. Mm-hmm. It covered everybody, the person and you. Like, no, mm-hmm. I went through so. I think that that's just a part of
common sense.
That's common sense. Yes. The next thing I want to talk about is the effective use of resources and spending money efficiently and effectively, and all the waste that is by kids mm-hmm. and by teachers.
Yeah.
Like
photocopy.
I will give you photocopying is one. Like drove me crazy. But notebooks, where I would go in and see a kid's notebook where they wrote on the first page and then the 5th page and then the 8th page. Like, is it not common sense to just teach kids to write on that page and then turn the page and then write on the next page? Mm-hmm. And to teach them, that's just when we talk about
recycling
and saving our environment and all that stuff. That starts right in the classroom with recycling. And I mean, the one thing that went away in classrooms was a scrap paper bin.
Right.
Because teachers themselves, like I always taught my own art. So we had scrap paper everywhere. I see kids that go to the back and pull like a huge piece of construction paper out and draw something in the middle of it. And I would not be bringing this up if it wasn't happening more than you think it is. So, and then I won't even talk about the waste of resources where teachers, I have to have this resource and this resource is going to make such a difference. And we would buy, like the board would buy thousands of dollars worth of something that was sitting on a shelf.
Like binders or books or software.
Yeah, that was sitting on a shelf because this will make all the difference. I just think we need to be better stewards. Yeah. And I mean, I felt very, and I walked into schools where all the money had been spent usually, and I was scrounging for money, but I was a steward and I spent it because I didn't think that a public purse should have money sitting in it at the end of the year. Like if you have a budget for a school,
but you spent
that should
on
be spent.
Kids. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, one of my most frustrating things is always the fact that now, if you want teachers to meet or plan or do anything, you actually have to pay for them to be released to do it. Whereas when I was a teacher, we took time after school and we met and we did. Like now you are kept to a 75-minute staff meeting.
Once a month. And that's all that you have. And the teachers can leave 10 minutes after the bell or something like that.
Yeah. Like, no, you can leave at the bell. It's only before
it's
school that it's legislated that you have to be there.
So they can work. I mean, now
so
virtual,
I would
obviously
say
they're going to be working
half of my budget as a principal went to releasing teachers to meet and plan and do.
To pay the supplies.
To pay supply teachers. So my proposal to the government is that people need to be on campus from 8 to 5.
Yep.
And then if you have to be on campus from 8 to 5, once COVID is over, obviously, you're there for an 8 o'clock meeting. You can accomplish a lot at an 8 to 9. That can be all the differentiation and special ed planning and all that between 8 and 9 every morning. 8 and 8:45, whatever you want, 45 minutes every morning. And then after school, you can run teams. Like if lots of schools end at 3, between 3 and 5, you can run teams. You can have curriculum planning.
So, and if teachers don't like it, then they have to choose between hourly wage or salary. Because if it's salary,
8 to 5,
you have to, like in Sebastian's job, he's receiving a salary. He works till the job is done.
Yeah.
He doesn't about per hour.
Yeah. So I mean, to me, that's a waste because you're allowing people to take advantage, like you just are. And if you...
And parents who are the taxpayers don't realize that this is what's happening.
I don't think a lot of people do.
No.
And then, there's the whole thing about professional judgment, right? Where people can just say, well, in my professional judgment, it should be done this way. And I, as a principal, always said, well, I appreciate your professional judgment, but I have some too. And so, in my professional judgment, you need to reevaluate your professional judgment.
And what research and data is your professional judgment based on? Because it should not be based on opinion or preference.
Yeah. But and I remember she's still a good friend of mine, but she was a superintendent, and she would always say, well, if you don't want to do the research-based way, then you just show me another research-based way of going about it, and we'll we'll talk about it, because I'm always willing to learn.
There are different flavors that are all researched.
And then the number 2 is student motivation and engagement, and who is responsible for motivating and engaging students? Are you responsible for all students? And are you teachers? Yeah. And are you responsible if kids are unmotivated or their behaviors are I know one of my favorite examples was a teachers bringing me like a piece of paper that a kid had spent 50 minutes doing, and they'd written swear words all over it.
The kid had.
Yeah. Oh. Like it would be like a crossword puzzle or something that they've filled in, and they've written swear words all over it, or they've done that. I mean, a friend of mine just told me a story about that.
Okay.
But I experienced that.
Yeah.
Okay, so how did a kid spend 50 minutes doing all that intricate writing of swear words, and you didn't pick up on that? Like, where were you walking around ensuring that that kid was on task, or saying, hey, I see you're choosing to write words that really aren't like appropriate, so is there a problem with you not understanding? And obviously that child has some kind of behavior issue. So what supports have you put in place to make sure that child is successful? And my saying to every teacher I ever worked with over and over again was, success breeds success. So if you want a child to be successful, give them success. And
that doesn't mean fake
no,
evaluation, saying good job on something that's
that
badly
spot
done.
where they're successful. And you only do that by, let's go back to knowing your students and differentiating and making sure things are in place. I mean, I remember...
And our buildings, our classrooms, I know teachers are all upset about class sizes, but you can walk around a class of 35 to 40 students. And in elementary, they aren't that big in Ontario.
When I started, I had 28 kids in I think it was a straight 3, but maybe. No, I don't know. No, because I had 5 boys in that class who were non-readers.
Right.
In grade 3.
But you still had 23
other
children.
And I had 7... girls who read and wrote a play based on the books of Anne of Green Gables for reading. Right. So I obviously was differentiating in that classroom because all those kids, like those non-readers, couldn't do what those girls were doing.
But by the end of the year, they were reading something.
But we had a centers-based... I ran a centers-based classroom where I had one area that was writing, but it had parallel tasks all the way from way up here to way down there.
Yeah, so the child could pick that.
Not because I was anything special, because I worked at it.
Yeah.
And I learned how to do that.
Well, you and your mentor.
Yeah. My mentor, Helen.
Yeah.
And the number one thing I think that would make a difference for kids in public education is a commitment to innovation and technology by everyone. Like, it is 100% obvious that we are not on top of our innovation and technology by how badly we transferred to online. This should not have been. We have Floop and Flip-Flop and all the... I know that Flip-Flop isn't a thing. Flip-Grid. That's it. Like, there's so many...
tools.
And I was trying to get teachers using Desire to Learn, D2L, as a site 10 years ago. And resist. Not everyone, obviously.
It's our favorite 20/80 factor, right?
Right. There's 20% of people. It used to be, when I started teaching, 80% of us were like, whoa, let's go, man. And we had the 20%, 15 to 20%. Now it's flipped.
Yeah.
Like 20%.
And if you talk to the strong teachers and the visionary teachers, they are so disheartened by the majority who
they're beaten down. They are actually
beaten down sometimes.
I think
they're bullied. They're bullied for being strong teachers.
Yes. And I think that the bullying that occurs, in a lot of public sector jobs is out of control.
It is.
And that, you can figure out, I don't know, how to explain how that happens, because particularly in schools, adults should not be bullying each other. No. And I was bullied as the leader in the school. So, but anyway, so those are my top 10. I will go back, I'll just read back through them. That long-term vision of the country is my number 10. And the use of student-centered data. strong leadership, commitment to equity, high-quality teachers who are held accountable, alignment, coherence, congruence, genuineness, whatever, a sense of community, effective use of resources, student motivation and engagement, and innovation and technology. So I think those are the 10 things that would change public education. And thanks for being
I'm happy to.
I don't know what you call it. I don't want to call it a nemesis, because
No.
that really wasn't it. But,
well, I'm your brick wall to bounce the ideas off.
Right. And you're honest with me, so that makes a difference. So on the May 15th, I'm going to do the 10 top contributions of women to society.
I better be here.
You can come back. But the 10 top contributions of women to society, because I think that's an equity issue, right?
Absolutely.
For sure.
There's still
like even the Bletchley Park, the Rose Code thing, about those women were never recognized for their contributions. And they talk about that in the book.
Nice.
That all the men that were there, important, but it was actually the women that were making
the code. Well, they were doing the code breaking.
Yeah, the difference. So thank you for joining us at No Room for Phonies for the top 10 things that would make the biggest positive difference in public education.
Awesome.